Hello? Oh, great. Here we are. I'm going to try and get through this without everyone becoming very, very depressed. Because we're
no! It's the end of the day. We have to be upbeat.
We are going to be upbeat. But let us first set the stage.
Uh-oh.
So,
here we go.
I'm going to give you a little bit of background on Valerie before we set the stage and go down that road. But Valerie was born in Iran to American parents and lived in Iran until she was 5 and then moved to London. And then we got her back home. And she also was working for the city of Chicago and interviewed a very talented young woman who was a lawyer by the name of Michelle Robinson at the time. And made a very smart decision and hired that young lawyer.
I spotted talent very, very early. She was only 27.
And since then, Valerie has become not only a trusted advisor and a family friend, but somebody who is like family to the Obamas, which means that I have to share her because she is my family as well, my cousin. And I am fortunate that she is here visiting with us. I've been trying to get her to the Women's Forum for many, many years. And
I was a little busy
for a few years. She was a little busy. Unfortunately, she's got a little more time on her hands, but we're all going to be really busy soon. So let's talk about what the Trump administration means for women and the impact.
Here we go. You ready?
The impact that he has had on women globally. It's a long list, and it's a very, very hard subject to talk about, I'm sure, for Valerie, because she spent 8 years in the White House really spearheading and working on a lot of the really important work that the Obama administration did. Not only did she run the Office on Intergovernmental and Public Engagement and was senior advisor to the president, but she also was one of the chairs of the Commission on Preventing Human Trafficking with Secretary Kerry. She worked on many, many policy areas, including foreign policy, as well as with the United Nations. She also worked on the Fair Pay Act. She also worked on the Domestic Violence Act. She also worked on ensuring that transgender people had the opportunity to serve in the military and fight for their country. She also worked to ensure that people of color, people with disabilities, the LGBT community were all treated fairly. And here we are. The day after the election, Leah, Daughtry, and Star and I, and many of you thought we were having a really bad day, but Valerie had to welcome soon-to-be President Trump to the White House. And I remember on social media seeing a picture that quickly went viral of a close-up of Valerie's face when he walked up. And I knew all that I needed to know about how that day was going to go for everybody, all the senior staff at the White House. And I just want to say, how have you been able to get through watching all of the good work that you all have done being unraveled?
Well, that was a very hard day, and I have to tell you, it didn't occur to me that a country that elected Barack Obama not once, but twice, would ever elect a Donald Trump. And so I didn't see it coming. And so not only was I profoundly disappointed in the outcome, but I was shocked too. I was like, oh my goodness. And the thing about the photograph is that we saw the reporters there taking the photograph, and that was my happy face. That was like the best I could do to not look like it was soul-crushing, but it was totally soul-crushing, but not because we'd worked hard for 8 years. That's what you do when you're a public servant, and you were in the White House nearly that long as well under President Clinton. Your job as a public servant is to serve and to work as hard as you can for as long as you're there. And I did arrive on January 20th of 2009, and I left after I waved goodbye to the Obamas on January 20th, 2017. So I was on borrowed time, staying as long as I did. So the work was what we expected to do, but to see the lives of so many Americans and people across the world who have been deleteriously impacted by the policies, by the rhetoric and tone, by the walking away from many of our international deals, whether it's the Paris Accord or the Iran deal, But also the sense that the United States can go it alone when we have always been, in a sense, that beacon of democratic hope. We were the model of democracy. And we were never perfect, let me tell you, but we were pretty darn good, and we tried to hold up those values as a model to people around the world. And so it's different now. And I will say, it is so much worse than I expected on that day that the photograph was taken. And I think I expected the policies to change. And look, we changed many of the policies of President Bush. Every policy we could think of, we changed of President Bush. But I will say this, and I say it every chance I get publicly about President Bush, is that he really provided, he and his team, a smooth and orderly transition. He believed in the norms of government, that what makes our democracy strong is you fight hard in a campaign, and then when the campaign is over, you are actually the president for the United States of America. And so he wished President Obama and us well, as we did the Trump administration when they came in. But we have seen an erosion of social norms. We've seen a level of hostility towards a good portion of our country and the world that I would never have expected. And that is going to take a while to get over. And you mentioned several of the ways in which he's rolled back our accomplishments. I think one of the ones that we are most proud of is the Affordable Care Act. Now, those of you who are not from the United States must have thought we were nuts to try to pass a law that would provide affordable health care, because in many of your countries, that's been a given forever. But to know that the Trump administration is in court right now today trying to repeal that act and would leave 20 million Americans without insurance and take away a lot of the protections that were there for the rest of us is pretty stunning. But we're not going to end this on a low note. What I have noticed over the last 3 years is a level of activism, the likes of which I really haven't seen before. And President Obama was a community organizer, so he thought he could get people activated. But when the vacuum was created, when he left, the moral leader of our country, and it was filled as it was, people got angry, starting the day after the inauguration with the Women's March. And in 2016, we hosted a White House conference that we called the United State of Women. 5,000 people came from around the world, and we were celebrating the work that we had done for women and girls while President Obama was in office. And we thought it was just a terrific conference. Well, guess what? In 2018, we decided, well, they did not continue the White House Council on Women and Girls, no surprise.
I forgot. They abolished the White House Office on Women and Girls.
Completely. It was gone. And so we decided, well, we'll have it anyway, and we'll create a not-for-profit organization that focuses on gender equity. And so we hosted another summit, and twice as many people came in Los Angeles. And guess what? Everybody in this room is invited to the one we're going to have next year in Dallas, Texas, and we expect it to be even bigger because they do everything big in Dallas. So, people from Dallas. So I say all this to say that at the same time as I am profoundly disappointed in the President of the United States, there are so many people around our country and around the world who are activated and working hard. We had more women run for office in Congress in the midterm elections.
And win.
And there's a great photograph of them all. And let's face it, what we're seeing right now today with the impeachment hearings would not be happening if there had not been an election where people came out and voted so that the House went back to the Democrats, and you have some checks and balances, which there simply had not been for those first 2 years. And so it's the activism, man, that gives me reason to be optimistic and hopeful, but we cannot rest on our laurels at all. I mean, we have to keep going, and would it be better if we had a president that was committed to gender equity and was fighting on behalf of us every day? Sure it would. But there is no substitute for the activism of ordinary people who I have seen do extraordinary things every day, and that's you guys.
There's even more of an imperative right now. I mean, it is urgent that we not sit back and be depressed and be sad. We've got to really look at ways that we can impact change, ways that we can stop policies that are negatively affecting children, women, girls. We've got to figure out ways that we can put barriers up and walls up to not let them roll back everything that we have advanced for. So everyone, we have a call to action for you. I'm going to let Valerie issue her call to action, but I want to really ask that as we move forward, that we move forward with hope, that we take what's happened in this past election, the midterms, that we look at what's happening not only in the United States, but in other places around the world. where truth is having an opportunity to be exposed, and people do have values. So, Valerie, what's your call to action to the audience?
So as I travel around the country, and in fact around the world, including here, some of you who came up to me here and said what I hear over and over again, and that is, are we going to be okay? And people are scared, and I think particularly younger people who maybe just assumed everything would continue on this line of progress and that things just get better and better, didn't realize that no, life obviously is sometimes full of zigs and zags, and our history, our nation's history, is full of zigzags. The world's history is full of zigzags. And what allows us to move it forward is when ordinary people decide that they're going to lead and not sit around looking for somebody else to lead for us. The other thing that I often hear, why doesn't President Obama speak up more? Why isn't he out there? Why aren't we seeing his leadership? He must be so deeply troubled by what's happening. Well, of course he is, but he's waiting for you. He led for 8 years, and now it's important that the next generation step up to the plate and get involved. And he will speak out when he sees things that are profoundly wrong, but he really is trying to pass the baton to the next generation. He's going to be at the DNC, the Democratic National Committee, having a fundraiser to try to help some of the young people who are running for office. And I think that is part of the arc. And I'll give you, just to give context, 1 year from my birthday, President Obama gave me a copy of the original petition for universal suffrage for women to have the right to vote. This was signed in 1866. Yeah, it was very cool. I don't know where he got it. And then, I asked him, and he said, presidents get these things. So I said, okay, fine. Framed alongside of it was the resolution that Congress passed introducing the right for women to have the right to vote, which was signed 53 years later in 1919. And so my point is that we can't afford to get weary or get frustrated and get distracted by a lot of what's happening. We have to get busy. And there is so much that each and every one of us in this room can do to improve the quality of life for women and girls, to make sure that we're tackling those big issues of climate change and AI and social inequality, economic inequality. And I feel so heartened by having been in the room with you these last 2 days that I leave here with a little extra commitment and lift in my step. And so my challenge to you is to just do your part. Do everything you can do. If you're a business leader, get in there and change the culture, improve the practices. If you're an advocate, go get some sleep and then get back out there and do it again. If you are in government, I mean, it isn't just who's at the top of the government. Everybody at all levels of government are vitally important to try to do the right thing. And so we need to encourage good people to go into government as well. I mean, I know a lot of folks who ran for office and didn't win in the last election in the United States, but guess what? I want them to get back out there and try again, because it is too important. The stakes are just too high for us to abdicate the voices that we all have. And if we are in a position to be an advocate, if we are in a position to change practices, if we are in a position to challenge the status quo, particularly as the status quo slips backwards, then we better rise to the occasion, and I know we will. Anne, what do you have to say?
My call to action is going to actually be something that you say all the time, which is, to whom much is given, much is expected. And so I challenge everyone to use the voice that you have and to use your voice on behalf of those who are voiceless, and to really step up and step into the void that exists. We have a void that, unfortunately, our country has created, but it's a void that we can step into, and we can step into that void on behalf of people who don't have a voice. So use your voice. Let's do this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Stay there, Valerie.